safe space here at Sleepy Hollow, snuggled against Lake Michigan. Mother found her for me. The Penguin Hotel in Grand Haven was overbooked, and a summer resort in South Haven had opened its doors to the overflow of tourists. We found Sleepy in the spring of 74, but I guess it was 73, on one of my mother's tours. I wanted to pick up the phone and tell my mother what a neat time I was having. I paused and then I stopped. I realized she wasn't here anymore. There would be no more phone calls. I brushed a tear from my eye, swallowed the lump in my throat, and said, "Thanks, Mom. Thanks for finding Sleepy Hollow for us."
So our family was, Stuart and Alexander and I, were introduced to Sleepy Hollow by the Levins 4 years ago now, I believe. So, and one of the best... One of the best parts of this for us from the very beginning was having Stan and Chris as our neighbors downstairs, and so we feel very, very fortunate to be here in general, but also for them as neighbors. And our friend Jamie Orlikoff will now give us the history from his perspective and from knowing
Can Anita join me too?
and please.
This will be a little bit more of a social history. It was covered by Stan and Chris, some of the points, and Paul, so I encourage a lot of folks to jump in. But just a couple of quick things. Many of you know that Anita and I were married here. I grew up here, started coming up here with my family in the mid-60s, and 3 generations of friendship with the Grays, my father and my mother friends with Paul's parents, Paul and I friends, and Ian and my son friends, so a lot of fun time there. You may have noticed a very quick in the film, and you probably didn't, but we have a copy of the blueprint courtesy of the Grays of our Unit 5, and most of the A's and B's were actually garages in the original design. There's one quick, like I think it was about 46 seconds in the film, where you could actually see a car in the garage. So 5B was a garage.
Where were the
In Cottage Row, so they were built. So we're happy to share the copies of the
blueprint over
blueprints
there,
over
but
there.
I have to spread it out.
Yeah, if you'd like to see a copy of it. So just a quick little bit of social history. First of all, safe place. I beg to defer. The high dive, the teeter-totter, the jungle gym. It was a death trap for kids. I want you to understand. So we tend to regard it as a Nietzsche aphorism, that which does not kill you, make you stronger. But for us, it was wonderful. And once you were water safe as a kid, you know, you had the run of the place, and it was absolutely wonderful. Families would tend to come up here before it turned into condominium in 1971 for about 4 to 6 weeks at a time, and it was a very interesting dynamic where people would rent the same time year after year after year. So it was really interesting that you know, you'd make a lot of friendships with kids and you kind of grow up together. One of the other things that was really quite interesting was, and Stan and Chris alluded to this, for a long time when Paul's father ran it, the place was really staffed by college kids. So imagine you're here as a renter and you're an adolescent. It was a really good time. There was a bonfire every night. The little house just outside was called Country Corners, and that was a dorm for the male counselors, and that was a scene of some really good parties. Really good parties. A wonderful, wonderful time. So so there was a time when I always loved Sleepy Hollow, but there was a time when I loved to come up here. But prior to that, when I was a teenager, we loved Sleepy Hollow because, or after that, thanks. There was a time when Anita and I were together where we especially loved Sleepy Hollow because they didn't allow dogs. And so when my parents would come up, they couldn't bring the dog. So someone had to stay home and watch the dog. So Anita, we had the house all to ourselves. So Sleepy Hollow served a very valuable function for me. And it was very, very...
So you'll notice that we raised our children here, but before they became teenagers, I got the dog house.
So we learned from that experience. But it was a wonderful place to grow up and learn to ride a bike, learn to swim here. A couple of interesting, just kind of historical pieces. about the lake. In the mid-70s, the lake was at an all-time high, and the lake actually came up to the stairs. So when you stepped off the stairs, you stepped into the water. There was absolutely no beach whatsoever. And some of you may remember, just an example of really forward thinking, this was when it was a condominium association. They did a special assessment, a significant amount of money at the time, I think it was about $28,000, to put in these huge cement sand traps. And a barge came, and the barge had, and they were about, each of them were about 25, 30 feet long. And the barge loaded them off and put them on the sand, where they sat for 2 summers before they were covered by the sand. So it was really, it was really ugly and didn't look good. But that's one of the reasons that we have such a gorgeous beach today, and such a big, long beach. And when you see, the beach recede, for our neighbors, it doesn't do that for us. So still thinking about the lake, there was the Alewife summer, I don't know if any of you remember that. And that was god awful, because in Chicago they would clear them off, but there were tons and tons of rotting dead fish lining the beach. And the smell, you could not get away from it. And it was an interesting memory, guys. I don't recall. That brings to mind one of the things Paul's father told me, which was that when he was running the place as a resort, when he tried to budget, he figured that 1 out of every 5 years would be lost to bad weather. That either incredibly cold, or remember, it wasn't air conditioned until the rebuild, incredibly hot, and so people would book, and if the weather was predicted to be terrible, they would cancel. So in his budgeting, do you remember that, Paul? Was it 1 every 4, or was it 1 every 5?
I don't remember.
Something like that. So interesting to bear in mind. Honey, oh, the winter, you spoke about that. The winterizing of the cabins, because you're exactly right. We tried to, my father bought some electrical tape with electrical wires in it, and had me crawl underneath, with Frank telling me what to do, Frank built, and tape all the pipes. And then we would simply drain one of the bathrooms to try to leave it open all winter. It was great. So we could come up here in the winter, and no one else was up here. It was wonderful. And we did that until my father got the electric bill. That's what it stopped. But at this time,
And he claimed that it cost as much to heat this place as his whole place in Chicago did. Yeah.
So we would beg him to do it. But literally, and Stan was right after, on Labor Day, it turned into a ghost town.
Yes.
Literally a ghost town. No one on the beach, no one in town, no one at Sleepy Hollow, and basically stayed that way until about April. So there was a time when you came up in the late fall, there was literally nobody else here. Came up in the winter, there was nobody here. And then, in fact, Patrick and Catherine, we came up here one winter right after they had started. And they were so offended that their idyllic paradise had been invaded that they almost called the police. So they came to us and said, well, what the hell are you doing here? We were like, well, who the hell are you? And it was born out of a great love for Sleepy Hollow, because it was such a wonderful place, which we all now get to enjoy because of the rebuild. And it's just a very different environment now in terms of how many people come up during the winter. Joe and Lenore are up here over Christmas. We're up here a lot in November. We saw quite a few people here, so that was quite interesting.
You bring something to mind, and I think it was Stan that was mentioning it. We used to have kids. We were in the old A-frame. We used to have kids from all ages at our table till midnight. They'd come from all over, and they'd just be at our table playing games, and it was just so relaxed and so wonderful. But the minute it got dark here, the kids around here would just play. And I don't see that over the years, but this must have been in the 70s. They would play, I don't know what the night games were they played. They'd be running around.
Capture the flag.
What?
If they can. Capture the flag.
Whatever it was, but that was really exciting. That was just so exciting that there was this camaraderie, because at this time there were owners and there were kids that were here for the whole summer.
Yeah, and that was before the rebuild. Many of you remember when the sun went down, it got dark. There were not nearly as many lights. There was one light on the stairs, and if you were walking around, you were carrying a flashlight.
Were any of you up here this summer when they had what's it called when the water goes up 6 feet high?
Seiche.
Yeah.
Were any of you here that summer
Yeah,
when there
I
was a
was.
seiche? And we were right in the water, and it was really scary. Or the year that there was the tornado, and they put us all under the pool. It was morning on a Sunday, and they put us, we were all there on our pajamas, and the streets in town sort of went up. They just buckled. So, I mean, there have been some exciting.
That brought to mind, more recently, Anita and I, this is about, 3 years ago? We were walking on the beach and some clouds were coming in and it looked rather threatening, so, and there had been no thunder or lightning, but we thought we better go up. And right before we got to the stairs, there was a lightning burst, and we both felt, like
You
a
know,
lightning.
in those old-fashioned midways things where they had that thing where you hold on to it and see how much electricity you could
Oh,
take?
yeah.
It felt like that went through our bodies, although I also felt kind of like I'd gotten hit.
Yeah, so we got,
Weird.
we got a glancing blow, so we've been much more respectful of being on the beach with thunder.
Whoever was living below the lower unit in the shore building before we had lightning rods was on the phone.
It was me.
It was you? You got hooked on the
Why
chair?
she is like
I
this.
back off my chair, I was talking on the phone, there was, it was a, not a mobile phone, but the kind of cordless. And I was talking on the phone, I was sitting at the table, and it hit, you're right, it hit that tree out on the bank, and it just went right through our unit, and I went over backwards. I was fine, and, but the outlets were blown out, there were 2 or 3 outlets in the house were just blown out. From then on, I got more careful about being on the phone during a storm.
Right, well, you'll notice that.
Now he's taking care of it.
I remember meeting the contractor who installs lightning rods at the building. Say, we gotta get this done.
Yeah.
Was.
It's not a guarantee, but I guess it
Well,
helps.
it's a lot
It
better.
helps, yeah, it helps. Just a couple of other memories from when it was a resort. I mean, Paul talked about this a little bit, but there was always music. In the theater, there would be movies, there would be plays, there would be one-person shows. Any of you remember Chamber Music Weekend?
Yes,
A group of
yes.
people been coming here
They
for
all had
over
white
40
legs.
years. Yeah. They played at our wedding, and they're still coming around playing, which was great fun. But there were many activities, not just for young kids, and not just the Harry Gray Pied Piper, but there were volleyball tournaments. There was a full-time tennis pro. Even when there were only 2 tennis courts, there were tennis tournaments, and that was a big thing. So if you were up here for a 4-week period, there would be like a staggered amount of playing, culminating in a tennis tournament. And Steve and your father used to play in those, and Paul's mother, Mary, and I used to play in a mixed doubles tournament. But there was always something going on. It was incredibly vibrant. The high dive that Paul showed pictures of, I used to love to play on, Paul used to love to dive on, was dangerous as hell. No one else ever got hurt on it, amazingly enough, but there were 2 basic dangers. One was if you didn't go off straight center, if you went off a little bit left, you found yourself looking down at the cement, because it was literally only 4 feet off. So if you came off and didn't know what you were doing, you came off like this, you had to do some very interesting mid-air acrobatics to be able to do a back flop or a belly flop in the water. And the other thing that was dangerous was you had to go basically straight up and come straight down to hit the V that was the deep end of the pool. Quite seriously, if you went out and all like this, you would hit the bottom of the pool when you entered the water, when you would knife into
That's
the
if
water.
you didn't hit a kid that was already swimming. To me, that was the biggest danger.
Yeah, that was
Remember
fun.
that?
So-
Get away from the high dive!
Yep. And you couldn't jump off the high dive, you could only dive. And so, one of the fun things that was, you always see about the high dive is there'd be a line of kids and they'd get up and they'd stand there for, 3 to 5 minutes and then they'd turn around and climb back down. So you'd be standing in line waiting to dive and it would take 15 or 20 minutes before the kids would come off. So, those are my rambling memories. Anything to add to those, honey? Or-
Not much, I'm gonna talk about blueberry pie.
Oh, the blueberry pie eating contest. You remember they used to have during the Blueberry Festival in downtown? They may well, but you may remember just kind of the up and down of the community. South Haven used to be a big resort town, as Paul was talking about, in the 40s, and then it died out, and then it was a farm town. So where Clementine's is now, does anyone remember McKinney's? You could buy ammunition, fishing rods, suits.
Yes, I remember that.
Just really, just an old-time general store.
What about your anniversary party that was so gorgeous?
Oh,
up
the
there?
25th wedding anniversary party, that was fun.
That was, tell them about it, and the musicians, they were unbelievable.
Well, it was embarrassing for my son because the lead musician for the party was his music teacher in grammar school. So, but he enjoyed that very much. But the town went through a lot of changes, and in the 60s and 70s, as Bob Rosen talked about, there was a little bit of friendly and sometimes not so friendly competition between Fiddlemans. He also owned the Fun Park on 68th Street in Phoenix, but there was a resort that he owned right downtown where you turn left to go into town. And there was a big competition between Sleepy Hollow and Settlement, and there was a big competition between our college counselors and their college counselors. And we would, when it was friendly, there would be like competitive volleyball games or softball games. And when it wasn't friendly, there were West Side Story-like rumbles that were scheduled, quite seriously, the scheduled rumbles, which never really turned into much. It was much more bluff and bluster than it was anything else. And all of you know Sherman's, and some of you may have not remembered that Sherman's was actually a working dairy, where the ice cream store was an afterthought, to the production of milk and cheese and things like that. And they put all their time into the working of the dairy. And they're the ones who sold the land for the construction of Walmart. And what the owner said was that they made far more money in the sale of the land than they made in all the years of operating the organization as a dairy. And just for nostalgia's sake, did they keep the ice cream store. So that's a little bit of the history of the ice cream store.
So where's the dairy now? Where's it being manufactured?
Where do they get their dairy stuff? No, they don't produce it anymore. They actually, they don't
now.
produce the milk. They buy the milk and they produce the ice cream on site. So I'm not so sure that that's supposed to be done. Pardon me? Yeah. So those are, love growing up here. It was wonderful. I love the place. Dave Stahl, who's not here. Some of you may know Dave and I occasionally get into these very intense intellectual arguments, and Dave puts it, he goes, Jamie and I have never agreed on anything having to do with Sleepy Hollow, except that we both love Sleepy Hollow. so that's nice. And so whenever we're in an intense argument, we can always kind of come back to that notion that we love Sleepy Hollow. It was a wonderful place to grow up. It was a wonderful place to raise kids, and looking forward to it being a wonderful place to raise children. And I need to have some
I have some of the old brochures of the place. The North Beach Inn, where we used to love to go for pancakes.
Oh, that's right. One thing, Stan, there was one, remember Bob Schneider, and when you went through the list of managers, left one year.
Yes.
And what was the name of the manager?
He came here and he was terrible.
Terrible, but he was here for like 1 second.
He didn't get it at all.
No, but I can't remember his
Wasn't his
name.
name Mort? His first name was Mort, but I
I
don't
can't
remember his
remember.
last
But
name.
then we have to add him to the list of managers.
Yeah.
So,
Who were here.
can we make one comment about Fiddleman's? They used to serve wonderful dinners at, it was just Friday night or the whole week, I don't remember. We would go occasionally, and this is gonna sound redundant, but we would buy dope from the waitresses. We make deals. But the dinners were good, and then Fiddleman's closed up pretty quickly after that. I don't know when it was.
So those are my, here,
And
here's
if anybody's interested, we also have his dad's original copy of the master deed.
master bylaws. And we also have the original copy of the blueprints which show the garage if you want to see that,
Yeah,
see
let's
that
read it.
afterwards.
Okay.
And those are some of our.
Joel, did you
I'll speak
have
for a
any
few
things to
minutes.
say?
Um,
Is that possible?
I'm a fourth generation Chicagoan, which is sort of unusual for Jewish people my age, in my late 70s now. My grandmother was born in Chicago, my dad's mother, and she was the oldest of 8 children, and the youngest one was probably 15 years younger than her. My dad was born in 1906. He was my grandmother's oldest child, and the uncle, my grandmother's youngest brother, was maybe a few years older than my father. And he was up here one summer. This is about how I am. And he was up here one summer, my Uncle Max. And he was over on the bridge. This must have been in the middle 20s, maybe 90 years ago. He was on the bridge, and he's talking to one of his buddies that he came with. I don't know if they drove or took the train or how they got here then. He had a little money. And he says to his buddy, see that lady on the bridge? I'm going to marry her.
Oh, come on.
True story. He marries her, and she has a younger sister, and that's who that uncle introduced my parents. The younger sister was my aunt's sister, and that's my mother, and that's how I am. South Haven. So I don't know if I think I told Lenore the story when I was courting her back in the 60s, but
Did it
no.
scare you?
The other story I remember is we have friends of ours who came up here, a woman, they used to have, I don't know if anyone knows this, a Miss Mendelssohn contest during the summer, a Miss Fiddleman contest. I don't know if we had a Miss Sleepy Hollow contest, but we're driving home with two friends of ours for many, many years, and one of them says, "Oh, I was Miss Mendelssohn." And the other one says, "Well, I was Miss Fiddleman, but I was also Miss Sleepy Hollow the same week. I mean, Miss South Haven the same week." So that was the story there. And the other thing I remember vividly is how we bought our A-frame at the time. We had owned a unit here, number 17, we had just bought it. I told Lenore we wanted to buy an A-frame, none of them had ever come up for sale. And I said, you never know if you're on the inside looking out. Sometimes better than to be on the inside looking out, the outside looking in. So we bought unit 17, and we're here, we owned it about 3 months, and my son tore up, who was playing volleyball that day? Was anybody there? Patty? We were playing volleyball, my son tore his knee up, and it was over Memorial Day, he was a junior in high school, and we had to transport him back to the city, and he was on crutches the whole summer, couldn't drive, and I came up here for one of Bob Schneider's Thursday night barbecues, and with our daughter, and Bob comes up to Lenore and says, I don't know if it was Bob, or maybe it was Ethel Litton, but I think it was Bob, said, by the way, one of the A-frames came up for sale. And I knew at that time that was our dream house, to own an A-frame. And I said to Lenore, I think we should look at it. Bob had no idea that we wanted to buy it. And I called my brother, who's an accountant, and I told him what he thought it would be. I remember making the phone call on a public phone here. We didn't have cell phones then, obviously. And I made the phone call, and he says, you can't pass that up for what you're paying for, so go ahead. We bought it in a half hour. I never bought anything so fast. I knew that I could not wait overnight, and we bought it, and we were fortunate that we had such a wonderful location. We love it still, and we come up here a lot, and we remodeled it, and we are thrilled that we're here.
Yeah. Let me just share one little thing. One year we couldn't get anything here, and we wanted to stay very badly. And in the unit on the beach, there was a unit, might have been your unit, before you even moved in. It was horrible. It was just terrible. It was terrible. And you know what? It didn't matter. We had fallen so much in love with this place. There's always expression that people say to us, because we come here all year, what do you do up here? What do you do up here? And they just don't get it, that it's a retreat. And it's just magical to us.
Yes.
And so, actually, when we first came up here, my mother-in-law suggested it. And we stayed in what's the unit right on?
Hotel.
The hotel.
At the time.
And the screens were torn, and the beds were metal, and the bugs were coming in, and I started to scream and to yell, and I said, oh, I could never stay at a place like this. And so we left, and then we came back, and we just fell in love with this place. And it's either you have it or you don't, and you understand exactly what it's all about.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers. We're gonna take a little break, and then food should be arriving
6:37.
around 6:37. A note about a couple of things. Back in the corner over there, we have a sweatshirt from the Markins and from the Foxes that have one of the older Sleepy Hollow logos. We went to Little Oscars, which is the printing place in town, and if you're interested, we're thinking about getting some t-shirts or sweatshirts or something fun made up. So put your name down, tell us how many you think you might want so we can just get a sense of what we might order. The other thing is that we're planning on digitizing all of the history book that we have and any of the other information that people have provided with us. And I've also asked you all to share your stories. I sent out some questions. If you don't like my questions, that's fine. Just write what you know about Sleepy Hollow and feel free to email it to us. And we're hoping to put all of this together and maybe with the help of Stan and Chris's daughter, find a way to archive some of this information and also perhaps find a way to put a history book together that we can make available to anyone who's interested. Yeah.
I'll ask this just for everybody in case they're interested.
Sure.
Any way to get the sweatshirts or t-shirts in children's sizes, or do they
Oh,
have to
yeah,
be adult?
we can do whatever we want. We can make hats, we can make bags, we can make sweatshirts, t-shirts, I mean, we have a
Okay,
catalog.
we just put our order in, but we couldn't do for kids.
Write
Yeah,
it
I
down.
think you can,
Okay.
as long as they're the same style of,
Yeah.
item, like the same style of shirt, they can do all different sizes.
They can do any size, any
Okay,
color.
we'll just put ages or?
Yeah. Or if there's something else you're interested in, let us know and we'll take that into consideration. And then the last thing I would say is, well, two last things. One, I want to give a big thank you to Scott, who was not only instrumental in setting up this room and making it look so beautiful, but also, you know, for the past 2 months, every week or so, I get little surprises from him of I found this document, or I found this photograph, or I found this whatever, and it's been really fun having his participation in this event. Meredith and I came up with this idea 3 years ago. This is our 3rd year of having the lecture series. And if anybody has any wonderful ideas, this one started with Joel saying, let's do a Pete Seeger sing-along, and it turned into this evening. So if anyone else has any ideas or more importantly, any interest in running this next year, please feel free and let me know. But we'll take a break now and then come back a little bit for dinner.
Thank
Great,
you.